Good evening and welcome to the public meeting this evening. I declare the public meeting open at 6:07 and would like to firstly state the purpose of the planning panel. The Bayside Planning Panel is charged with considering planning proposals of any scale and value and determining development applications where the value is less than $30 million and where there is a potential conflict of interest or it is a contentious development, or there is a substantial departure from development standards, or it is a sensitive development. Council no longer considers these types of developments. In particular, the panel must consider development applications which have attracted 10 or more unique objections in a public meeting. Others may be considered outside of a public meeting. All decisions are published on Council's website, normally within 10 days. Hopefully, we can resolve this a little faster than that. Live streaming. This public meeting is being recorded and is live streamed to Council's YouTube page. The recording is an official record of Council and may be made available to persons upon request in accordance with Freedom of Information legislation, Government Information Public Access Act 2009. Applicants and members of the public that have registered to speak on an item will be asked to unmute their phone or computer at a convenient time to address the panel and to answer any questions. Alternatively, members of the public may be registered for the meeting by making a written submission which has been provided to the panel members. Once the panel has heard from all speakers, including applicants, we will either make a decision during the public meeting or adjourn to consider our decision. As previously mentioned, all decisions of the panel will be published on the website. Let me begin by introducing the panel members, or allowing them to introduce themselves. Lindsay, if you could introduce yourself to start, please.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lindsay Day. I'm a consultant town planner. I'm on this and 8 other panels. I've got qualifications in geography and town planning. I'm a member of the Planning Institute of Australia, and I'm an ongoing mentor for that institute.
Lindsay, thank you. Anna, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Ross. Good evening. I'm Anna Corpus. I'm here as the community representative. I'm Senior Policy Officer and have been with the State Government Department of Planning and Environment for over 25 years. I have a postgrad degree in policy with the University of New South Wales, and I'm a resident of Bexley for the last 15 years.
Thank you, Anna. And Larissa?
Good evening, Larissa Rozog. I'm an urban planner, have my own consultancy. I've worked in local government, state government, and I sit on a number of panels. Thanks.
Thank you, Larissa. My name is Ross Bonthorn. I'm an architect planner. I have been involved with this committee for some period of time, as well as other panels. I worked with the Lend-Lease Corporation for some 29 years as the principal architect and as a board member. And then subsequently, in recent times, have been involved in the major master planning, urban design and strategic thinking for projects, particularly in Asia and China and in India and the Middle East. I was also a councillor for the City of Sydney and subsequently was appointed to establish the Pittwater Council when the secession occurred, and subsequently was elected to Pittwater Council as part of my some 20 more years in local government. And I, as I indicated, have been serving on this panel now for some time. Let me move then to the agenda. Item 1, acknowledgement of country. Bayside Council acknowledges the traditional custodians, the Gidgil and Bidgil people of the Aurora Nation, and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. The people of the Aurora Nation, their spirits and ancestors will always remain with our waterways and the land, our Mother Earth. Item 2, apologies. We have no apologies. Item 3, disclosures of interest. I believe that all of the panel members have filled out forms, but I would have them confirm they have no, or they have or have no disclosures of interest.
No disclosures of interest from me.
Thank you. Anna?
None for me either. Thank you.
And no conflicts from me either.
Thank you, Lucia, and I have no conflicts of interest. Item 4, minutes of previous meetings. 4.1, Bayside Local Planning Panel for the 13th of June 2023. The Bayside Local Planning Panel notes the minutes of the Bayside Local Planning Panel meeting held on the 13th of June 2023 have been confirmed as a true record of the proceedings by the chairperson of that meeting. I believe that chairperson was me. Item number 5, reports, planning proposals. I believe we have no planning proposals this evening. Item number 6, reports, development applications, of which there are 2 applications. The first, 6.1, is a modification for a development in Bunnerong Road, East Gardens, and I believe we have Mr. Jarvis present. Miss David, are you there? Or
I am, yes. I was just turning my mic on.
Thank you very much. You've no doubt read the report which has been circulated. Do you have any comments or any further information you'd like to add before I pass it on to the members of the panel who may have questions?
I do not know. It's a fairly simple modification. The pool's been relocated to avoid a sewer that wasn't picked up on the survey drawing. The basement has shrunk slightly. When we're looking at the structural details, there was a lot more in it, underpinning than we anticipated. And there's been a slight modification to the roof to avoid a box gutter detail against a neighbouring property.
Thank you. Yes, the panel has been to inspect this, and in fact, I think a few of us have seen this before. As you've indicated, I guess some of those junctions are a little challenging, and so further clarification is obviously part of why this submission has been made to us.
Yeah.
Do other panel members have any questions at this stage or comments?
None from me.
None from me either.
The recommendation is for approval. If there are no further questions, then I will allow this to be perhaps discussed if people wish to discuss it further, or otherwise we can move to the next item. Are there any comments any of the panel members would like to make regarding this application?
There may need to be a slight change in the wording of the recommendation in terms of some of the additional plans will need to be itemised as being modified as a result of the proposed development that aren't listed at the moment in the report or the recommendation. That hasn't got any implications for any changes for you. It's just additional reference needs to be made.
Okay.
Lindsay, I think there were several different plans included in the documents, and so it's just a confirmation that we are definitely approving the correct plans, the ones which are the intended ones, because...
Yeah, I think so. So on page 25, where there's a strikeout involved, they're the new plans that were involved and underlined, and they align with the plans that have been lodged with this application. And I confirm that with the architect as well, you make sure that my list did line with their list, and it did, so they should be all the plans, or the couple that didn't change, settlement control plan and settlement control detail. And then the cultural report was added as an approved document, so it should be all the documents. It might have been some of the plans in the previous one.
The draft conditions on page 36, things like the south and east elevation, west elevation, etc., they will actually need to be marked as changed. So I'm not sure that the listed and the dates of the various plans listed on page 36 are accurate, because there would have been later versions. So it's really just a clerical thing that needs to be rationalised. So yeah. Doesn't change the proposed development or the recommendation. It's just paperwork.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Jarvis, do you have any further comments you'd like to make? Otherwise, as I've indicated, this has obviously been before the panel before, and I think actually moving the pool probably gives a better solution for the rear yard and the landscaping and the use generally of the ground plane.
I think so too.
So sometimes these things work out better with the second time round, but hopefully this now is something which can proceed and you can enjoy the new dwelling.
Yeah, I believe everybody's very keen for that to happen.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your attendance tonight, and this will be resolved and notified within a day or so.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that's item 6.1. Item 6.2 is 5 Bryant Street, Rockdale. We have a number of people present. We have Andrew Nicol representing the architects and then council staff as well. So is there any comment that you'd like to make, Andrew, before we get further into discussion? And any other comments from Louise? No? Then I'll open it up to the panel. Let me say we have been to inspect this today. We have looked at it and we have had some fairly lengthy discussion about a number of things this afternoon and early this evening. So I'll open it up to the panel for them to ask questions or to make comments at this stage. So who'd like to start? Larissa, thank you.
Sorry, so start off, I suppose, very enthusiastic about a proposal like this. Everyone likes to see this. I think it's great for the public domain. But a few issues. Is the REF approved for the works, for the landscaping works and for the demolition of the adjoining building? So the problem is that this proposal is contingent on that, and it makes it very difficult, can't have them overlapping and can't. So there's a way potentially moving forward that we could deal with that. But this approval can't go ahead until that REF is approved, because you obviously realise having 2 consents makes it quite complicated. I deal at the moment with a lot of state government matters and they do it the same way, and we've constantly got issues because you just can't have an overlap. Ideally, it would have been much better to have the whole proposal, and we could have in one go had an integrated form, because it seems, if I'm not correct, like, is the community centre bins, is that in or is that out? Because that's not hatched, but it's on this side. So it's like, well, yeah.
Sorry.
That's
Yes, that major addition.
Would you like to just come up so we've got a formal record of the questions and answers, and just come up to this one?
Yeah.
And all you do to become live is and then press it off when you think.
Yeah, so in answer to the question, the bins were supposed to be, or the bin enclosure was supposed to be part of the development application. That was added at a later, as an addendum to the original application.
so. I suppose at this stage the REF's not approved, so moving forward with this is really very difficult to do this without the REF having approval, because of the obviously the overlap and the reliance on the REF to then initiate these works. I suppose another issue for us was why, in terms of an urban design kind of context, is, you know, you've created quite a nice entry in terms of design wise and semicircular and, you know, nice, but you've kind of put the toilets right where the entry is, and the thought process behind that, you know, why put them there where you've got a lot of space on the sides? I know it's very difficult to integrate because you're just refurbishing the hall, so you need to try and get them somewhere. So, but could it have not been integrated behind, maybe behind the kitchen, and then reorganize the meeting room space somehow? I mean, it's just not the best use of the entry, the key point where it's formality to come in with the toilets in that location on a commercial kind of street front in a way.
Yes, in response, obviously, and as you'd understand, there were some sort of site constraints, and the original sort of brief and how this project developed was to essentially maintain the existing sort of hall pretty much as the existing hall is, and repurpose that part. And then the portion to the rear of the property as well was to be repurposed as well, but working mainly within the use of the space. There were existing toilets when the project was developed, I think in the early 1960s, that were located sort of at the front of the building as well, which helped with from a pragmatic and practical point of view, helped with sort of connections to sewers and whatnot. Spatially, it was quite difficult, obviously, to get the number of toilets for a venue of the size that was proposed. And having the toilets at the front, I guess the design strategy behind that was the front sort of reception lobby waiting area. We had tried to tuck the toilets off to the side so that you came, when you entered the building, you came in, the first thing you saw were the front doors. To the right of you was sort of the curved glass looking out, and then behind a wall to the other side was supposed to be the bathrooms. And the way they were supposed to present to the street was, obviously we have a battened facade, and we were going to do a frosted sort of glass on the side that faced the toilet. So when you're reading it from the street, if it was lit at night, it would read as sort of a more cohesive facade and wouldn't read as sort of toilets and sort of lobby space. So that was sort of the design strategy behind it. I do understand that it's maybe not the best, but at the same time we were working with an extremely tight envelope there with the front boundary and retaining that existing wall.
So that was it. And one other question I had for you was in terms of flooding, that the new works are not built up to the flood level, and kind of why, because it's such a critical issue at the moment in terms of planning and design.
Of course, thank you. So the main reason they weren't was the tie-in and the levels between the current existing proposed hall and the addition, and we were maintaining an accessible path of travel then would become the issue. So we would have, I think there was sort of several hundred millimetres from memory between the required new flood level and the existing building. The only way that could really be changed would be to raise, I believe, all the other floors to compensate with that. Otherwise, it'd be left with a step between the main entry and the building. And part of the strategy and part of the design strategy behind it was that. And one of the main reasons why we just have a ramp was that we wanted to make access equitable for everyone, and there to be one point and one entrance point into the building. So there wasn't that segregation between, people with prams, people with wheelchairs, and people without. Everyone entered the building in one. So I accept that yes, there is issues around the flood levels. The only way I could see that would, the flood report that we had does address certain sort of risk factors, I believe, about sort of evacuation of the centre in a flood event, and also looks at sort of the materiality that would be used within the building. So if there was a flood event, we're proposing sort of concrete and durable materials that would withstand flooding. But yeah, the main reason has purely been to work with the existing retain the existing building and tie in the front structure with that.
Did you have any comments or questions?
Just some observations, comments and questions. The plans indicate that solar panels are, potential. We would actually, in any sort of consideration, require those to be actually done, or the undertaking given to do them, rather than making it optional. And I guess we've had a discussion in the panel this afternoon around the fact that this is a council-owned site, and all of us on these panels approve things all the time with plans of management with certain expectations. And one of the things we would require is that a plan of management be redrafted to be more consistent with those sort of requirements, which are things not only like solar panels, but a complaints register so that people can make complaints and it's a consistent process with council. Some of the panels I've been on in the past make approvals that require a trial for a certain amount of period. And I guess we haven't really drilled down into that detail, but that's another possibility, so that it's a constant improvement of the process in terms of public land. I guess one question is the hours of operation. I understand they're very long and that's fine, but the number of weeks, page 115 on the report talks about it being 50 open or available 51 weeks a year. And then that is to be closed for the Christmas New Year week and then all public holidays, which actually makes it'd only be available 50 weeks a year. Pedantic. But we then started to discuss and think, well, why, if community events, many are scheduled on public holidays, which shouldn't really be restricted so that it can't be operating on a public holiday. So that is a sort of amendment that we would look to make. And I guess just going back to Larissa's point on flooding, council, I think, has to be very vigilant that it is meeting the same standards that council expects in its approvals of applicants outside the public land ownership. Just wondering about bicycle facilities. There seems to be some on the street, and then there were some planter boxes that were apparently going to be problematic, you know, too cluttered a little streetscape out there. So I wonder what the alternative positions are for bicycle parking.
If I can just give a little bit of background about the planters and where they came from. During the assessment through council, discussions were had with various departments in council about a pedestrian safety management. So the idea had come through discussion, and that was that rather than erecting a fence along the street frontage, which is now a particularly nice design outcome to have a fence, was to instead incorporate planting. So planting between obviously the roadway and the public footpath, and that to be a deterrent from people from jaywalking across the street. I was we were sort of under the understanding at that time that was an acceptable strategy with council. It's now obviously come back in the in the draft conditions of consent that I've read that say that is to be removed. So we will happily remove that. And would have to look at how we would integrate then the bicycle parking along there within that design now that is to be removed, so that it is, you know, that there is adequate bicycle parking. We had proposed the steel sort of loop structures there so that wouldn't take up too much footpath space, because we do have limitations of the width there. So we would need to relook at that sort of design now that the idea about removing the planters has been taken out, to make sure that we can get that to work and work within the public domain, and also work within the public domain strategy for the entire area, because it is obviously within sort of the Rockdale town centre. So whatever our sort of approach, there needs to be an approach that is suitable for the entire area, and is not just sort of piecemeal or out of sorts or character with the area.
Yeah. There seems to be, through the report and various documents within the report, some inconsistencies in terms of the number of staff and visitors. It seems to be around 100, but there are a few discrepancies. Are you able to just clarify in terms of patrons and staff to support, please?
Yes, of course. I think, and can I just say, I would apologise for any errors in the report. At the time, we would, and we are looking at what this facility would be used for. So whether it would be meetings, art exhibitions, concerts, etc. So having sort of, I think that's where some of the confusion around, say, the numbers, because the numbers would sort of fluctuate. We were basing it on a maximum of 100 patrons or 100 get visitors to the centre, and the approximate staff number at its maximum, I believe, would be 6. That obviously could be a lot less at other times if, you know, if it's a if the centre is used for a smaller sort of workshop or meeting, that number might dwindle, but the absolute maximum was 100 patrons and 6 staff.
Probably last but not least is a little bit of concern, given that there can be up to 100 visitors, often requiring food and drinks, etc., about the loading facilities. So I'm just wondering, food and so on for that many people, where is it going to be dropped off? How is it going to be got into the centre, etc.?
Right.
Sorry,
I believe the strategy for that was off the laneway that runs along the side, and there is some parking there. That was to be the idea for it. And my understanding as well with the catering, or the level of catering to be used, it's supposed to be sort of, I suppose, sort of light refreshments, light catering, not as such a full sort of 3-course meal, but more sort of canapes for an art exhibition or light refreshments for a meeting. But yes, the sort of the loading arrangements would come from that side lane.
I guess if that is the intent, in terms of the use of the site, that would have to also be specified in the plan of management, because it has an influence on all sorts of other things. Thanks for that. That's all from me.
Anna, do you have any comments or questions?
Thanks, Ross. If I may go back to the flooding discussion. Sorry, I missed. You mentioned you explained the strategy behind not going above that flood line, but you also acknowledged that there is a risk. So, in your professional opinion, is the risk neutralized, or would the benefits over that design strategy be commensurate to addressing the risks posed by flooding? Does it balance out? Is it worth taking that risk for that design strategy?
I believe it does. I believe that the strategy proposed via JN Engineering for appropriate warning and evacuation of the centre is quite an important strategy, and a strategy that can be easily implemented. From a construction point of view, as I said before, the material selection and making sure that this building would withstand flooding, so ongoing costs would be reduced, would be a benefit. But I think that providing an accessible centre for use by the community probably is of a high importance and a high degree. And I think that the risks of flooding can be mitigated through evacuation, through materials, through those sorts of strategies. And I believe that sort of can be the benefits of providing a flexible, multifunctional space for the community outweighs.
Thanks for that. But do you have because you're citing benefits versus risks, did you do a risk-benefit analysis?
Sorry, no, it hasn't been. A risk-benefit analysis has not been done.
So how can you equate the two?
Sorry, that was a personal opinion. Sorry.
Okay, so are you thinking that the risk does not quite warrant a risk-benefit analysis?
I believe that and I'd have to look back over the flood information. I believe it was obviously flooding occurs, and I'm not saying it doesn't occur, and it's obviously occurring a lot more at the moment. The risks for the flood, there were several flood levels that were there. I believe one was a 1 in 100 risk. I would have to say I didn't think that would require a risk analysis, but if that is one of the things that is required to answer this and to progress the proposal ahead, we're happy to undertake one.
Not exactly suggesting that it should be a condition, or it's that it's a requirement, because we're not sure whether what flood risks we are anticipating. But at the end of the day, because this is a council-owned and operated facility, we'll have to make sure that we eliminate all sorts of risks and hazards, because if something happens, council is liable for any incident, accident, or injury that happens to any of its patrons or clients or customers. So that's the point I'm driving at.
Any other comments or questions? Andrew, I think we've discussed this at length today and inspected the site, as we mentioned. And as you can see, there are some concerns that the panel have about some of the content. I have some concerns, and it's not as if we're not supportive of the idea of the church and the recycling and reuse, because it's fabulous. I mean, there's no question. And when you put it in the context of the precinct of Rockdale and the heritage areas and this building, that building, the council building, it's a terrific project. But as you've heard, there are a number of things which seem to need to be further addressed. And so one option is that we sit and draft any number of conditions trying to cover all of those things that would be considered that my panel members and I may raise, or, and please don't misunderstand the intent, we seek to defer this to allow you to, and the applicant, to meaning council, to address the issues that my colleagues have indicated to concern them, rather than refuse, because I think none of us are wishing in any way to see that this is not something that would proceed as quickly as possible. Alternatively, we've used phrases like possible deferment as a way through, or other ways of perhaps considering how to address it. But I think it may be, when we discuss it ourselves a bit more, that there is a deferral identifying to some extent, but what you've heard, the concerns. I mean, at another level, I guess what Larissa raised is something that concerns me, is the whole lobby, the entrance, the toilets, the scale of the lobby. That, I mean, if there are to be 100 people, then there needs to be something which addresses the civic quality of that as an entrance. And maybe the bathrooms need to be put somewhere which is not in the current location, which, and again, please don't misunderstand this, they don't look like civic or community facilities. They are, unfortunately, also, according to one of the documents, not complying with the access dimensions that you need. Yeah, I mean, we try to do our homework before we come to these meetings in order to ensure that we're not being pedantic or difficult. But I guess, to me, I also question whether or not the only access to the hall is by the ramp that comes up, and whether from Bryant Street there isn't the ability to at least allow some way of getting to the entry with the ramp as a supplementary, which is the common way of doing things, that the direct access is something that's provided somehow off Bryant, and the ramp for disabled people happens. Similarly, I'm assuming the extension of the building is at the same level as the existing hall. From the drawing on, and there are several different plans, which also makes it a little hard for us. I mean, I think the latest one, which we have on page 160 of the reports, starts just to show the planning strips, etc. But equally, the circulation within the building is something that you may wish to look at in how you access the other two meeting rooms. Because at the moment it would appear that you walk all the way to the back of the site and up a curvy ramp, which is a lovely, nice thing to draw, but then you have to walk back again to get into a vestibule. So, I mean, we are not here to redesign or replan this for you, but it's suggesting that the council is setting a benchmark of what we would, or what it would expect to happen for its projects, that we would like to use as the best example possible for other people. And I'd suggest that it's possible to revisit some of the things that we've raised with you, but with the intention that, please, this is probably a terrific idea. I mean, what a great thing when you see the old church which is there, which needs to be torn down, and the space is obviously not used. You know, I mean, it is a place where the residents and the workforce that are in the town centre area could get huge benefits from it. It has northern sun. It's got a lovely tree at the back, which is something which we hope you don't chop down. But it's trying to encourage something that is slightly more a civic and community facility at a scale which is going to provide not just amenity but safety. I mean, pedantically, you show a handrail at the boundary of Bryant Street and there's a drop to the footpath. What's stopping children falling through? Right? I mean, it's boring stuff, I'm sorry, but it's the sort of thing that we're trying to tactfully suggest that some of these things need a little more attention, a little bit more focus, without discouraging you at all. But I mean, I think what we as a panel are saying, please do not be disenchanted with the comments and the, let's say, advice we are trying to pro-offer. But I think this whole entry foyer needs to be addressed so that if there is to be 100 people, there is some level of access and entry into the facility that relates to 100 people. And maybe the toilets can be somehow put somewhere else. I mean, I'm sure the fact that there's some plumbing there now doesn't mean a thing in real terms. I mean, what's there is not really great. The thing that is good is the little building with its funny little pseudo-Gothic arch windows and things. I mean, that's the fun stuff. But I guess, I mean, I think there is a big question mark about what I'd call the ground plane, about circulation and access, circulation externally, circulation internally. So please don't be discouraged. And I say this, Louise, to you, don't be discouraged. I mean, I hope what we are indicating and what my colleagues have indicated is encouraging you to create something which in fact is what is an example of the council's best possible design excellence, because it's not quite excellent yet. And I use the word yet. So we'll talk a bit more about this, and there'll be a recommendation. But I think the likelihood is we would ask you to address the issues that we have raised. And I mean, I think they're not that challenging, but I'd be interested if you could respond to what I've been trying to perhaps cautiously advise. Either of you. Louise, if you have.
We're happy to have a look at the design and go back and revisit it. There's some key things that I think that we can certainly address. We have been trying very much to work within the existing building and an existing site that has the Rockdale spine around it and will eventually be developed. So we've been quite conscious not to block off any of the external walls. So I think Andrew and the team have been given very tight parameters to work within, because ultimately this building will be seen in all 4 elevations in the future. So we didn't want to do things like pushing the toilets to the back and, blocking off another wall. So, I still think that we can go back and have a look at how we can improve the design to get a really good community space. And internally, we've been talking about how the space will be used, which can then better inform the response. At the moment, we've tried to keep it open so that it can be a theatre, an exhibition, a community space. But if we narrow that down, that gives us more ability to design the intricacies of the interior of the building as well.
just maybe to reinforce, Russ, what you've already said, that the intent of all the comments that we're providing is for council to be a beacon for all the other developments around the area and to be forward looking, because you want this to be functional for the next 10, 20 years, which requires for the design to be really best practice and leading, not just in space utilization, but maybe also in terms of providing the amenities, say, Wi-Fi or digital access, electronics, lighting effects, etc. So, it's a development that council could say to everyone, follow this model. That's I think our and which is in the best interest of the community and the best interest of council. So win-win for everyone.
Just further to that point also is I can see that you're trying to integrate a lot of things in here, like the meeting space to diversify the uses. And I appreciate that's a really good thing, but potentially because it's so constrained, I'd consider maybe just the big purpose of just having a really great hall for cultural functions. It's going to be your key space, your iconic space for that one thing. Meeting rooms, are they that critical? Probably not. You've got a council probably full of them and other facilities. I kind of think you've got a cultural space that you could really create an iconic space and avoid some of the other clutter that you don't need. Keep it to the key things, whether it even be a small little tiny cafe at the front, people can get a drink, or, some kind of cloakroom, or make it really interesting and make it an exhibition space that people really go, well, that is one unique space and position, rather than try and, have an office and a beanie space and put a lot of things into it. I just keep it to one purpose. That's just my thoughts. But obviously you've got a scope of works and, you need to fulfill that. But I think that might help you resolve some of the design issues by simplifying it a little bit more. That's all I kind of think.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Keep it simple. Less is more.
Thank you. And we wish you very best of luck, in the sense that, I can tell you're both hugely excited about the prospect of what this can be. Be assured, so are we. And so our advice is hopefully taken with good intent, and hopefully the councillors will understand perhaps the reasons why we have made these suggestions, because I think what my colleagues are indicating to you is it's not just our expectations, it's the community's expectations. So thank you for your patience and tolerance today. And good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.